Chosen one. Real actors are the most dangerous in a world of actors. Not just a quote, a warning. Something changed when you stopped dimming your brightness, shrinking to be digestible, and apologizing for being real. Not in you. You've always known yourself. They constructed entire identities on performance, manipulation, and being whatever the crowd desired. Not just entering differently. You revealed their entire deception. Here's the fact most won't say. Being authentic is unusual, yet it doesn't bother people. Honesty makes them uncomfortable. It shows how many masks they've worn to fit in. When you were honest, unedited, and unapologetic, you upset their environment. They worried because they couldn't anticipate, control, or guilt you. You didn't follow their script, and they understood they were dealing with something stronger than revolt. Their opponent couldn't be programmed. Psychological evidence supports it. Studies reveal most prefer acceptance over authenticity. To avoid rejection, they'll compromise themselves, discard their beliefs, and transform into whatever suits the room. However, you chose truth over comfort. You choose freedom over conformity. You were their matrix glitch, an unplanned truth in a rehearsal room. You said little, let's be honest. Just being yourself made them fidget like they heard police knocking on a door they weren't at. They called you tough, arrogant, and threatening. Our regular techniques can't control you, they said. You weren't applause dependent. Social points didn't buy you out. You held their worst fear without flinching. Your honesty was unique and scary. So they're scrambling to rewrite the rules of a game you ended. Welcome to the phase where the chosen one stops trying to fit in and flips the power structure by telling the truth. Let's begin. First, your honesty shattered their lies. They built everything on performance. Every smile was practiced. Every compliment and conversation is premeditated and manipulated. Everyone around them had secretly or publicly decided to play along with their image, which was their currency. You came with only your truth, without performance or mask, just present. The fishers appeared then. Yelling, shouting, or blaming didn't reveal them. You exposed them by being yourself without permission. That alone dented their delusion. They were unprepared for a non-image player. They had no idea how to react to someone who didn't need approval to feel entire. You were dangerous because of that. Not only did your honesty confront them, they were revealed. Since they had spent years developing a reputation, it highlighted how phony their connections were, how thin their confidence was, and how fragile their sense of self is. You breathe, walk, and live in perfect harmony. It ripped through their performance like wind through paper. You didn't reveal anyone, which is absurd. No need. Truth doesn't need attention, makes its own. It happened when you stayed true to yourself. You made others question their long-term deception. You made folks wiggle without speaking. Energy like that is unusual. Not loud, yet enough to rock foundations. Truth is dangerous when everything around you is falsehoods. They labeled you scary, hard, too much. That was projection. Real issue. Your honesty prevented them from living in their performance. They weren't destroyed. You revealed their cover. That's why they dreaded you. You were a mirror. They couldn't manipulate. They expected people to bend, shrink, and accommodate to their responsibilities. They maintained control by molding others to their liking. It was never about truth. It concerned dominance. Mirrors that boosted their ego were preferred over truthful ones. You entered and they hit a wall. Performance wasn't your thing. You weren't seeking points or acceptability. Without filters, you were yourself. That changed the power dynamic. You didn't conform to their insecurities. So you didn't act humble to make them feel big. You didn't exaggerate your pain or belittle your strength to be appreciated. They couldn't distort your reflection. It made them uncomfortable. Because they could convert others into watered-down copies of themselves, but not you. Pressure didn't faze you. You didn't fake feelings to appease them. Your authenticity, not your aggression, made you a menace. They picked at you, questioning your tone and calling you arrogant or insensitive. But they were distractions. They meant, you're not mirroring what I need to see to feel superior. They were used to people mimicking their illusions, power, and brokenness. When you refused to reflect that back and instead reflected truth, they saw portions of themselves they couldn't manage. You exposed their hypocrisy by existing. You revealed how insecure, greedy for control, and desperate they were to maintain the illusion. They sought to discredit you because they couldn't alter you. It didn't work since your honesty wasn't based on their acceptance. You didn't represent them. Seeing their soul in your mirror worried them more than anything else. Third, you accepted solitude to avoid their control. They thought isolating you would shatter you, that losing their support, discussions, and fake love would make you want to crawl back and beg for acceptance. They ruled everyone with fear of being alone. Their attempt on you failed. You're not folding, didn't chase. You didn't kill yourself. You grew stronger. They understood they had no control over you then, because they didn't realize you'd faced your loneliness. You found tranquility after walking through the silence most people fear. You listened to yourself, God, and your inner knowing in isolation, whereas they used people as distractions, noise, and affirmation. After the noise subsided, your clarity returned. They were unprepared for that. They feared solitude would empty you, yet it filled you. Rooting occurred. You stopped outsourcing value. You chose yourself, thus you no longer needed others. You couldn't be manipulated by shame, quiet, or feigned loyalty. You no longer needed their approval. In that calm space they sought to punish you, you discovered yourself. Being anchored in that gives them nothing to use against you. No psychological trickery, social pressure, or emotional bait. Your strings were no longer pullable. Most people fear being alone because they're terrified of what they'll find when everything is gone. You met yourself in that empty place and didn't run. You owned it. That made you untouchable. They tried to exile you, but they just pushed you into your power. Now they want connection, affirmation, and control. And you're walking in tranquility they can't fake. You accepted solitude and became uncontrollable. Fourth, you revealed inclusion's cost, not inclusion. They expected you'd fold when they retracted the invitation. That you follow the crowd, water yourself down, change your tone, and rework your truth to get back in. People are trained that way. Reward obedience, isolate authenticity. You didn't seek inclusion, didn't beg to sit at their table. You got up and inquired why the table was based on lies. Then everything changed. Your nonconformity confused and exposed them. You made folks uncomfortable by not playing the character. They weren't used to someone ignoring permission. For them, belonging meant survival. They spent a lot to be admitted. To stay in the circle, they suppressed, betrayed, and faked. You entered stating you'd rather stand alone in truth than lie comfortably. People who define themselves by fitting in fear that clarity. You stopped being acceptable when you kept your integrity instead of purchasing admittance with your soul. You reflected everything they sacrificed for likes. You didn't yell. You didn't beg. You didn't outsell. That calm defiance rang louder than protests. They went far for inclusion, whereas you didn't. That was unexpected. People wanted to sit at their table, they thought. You wanted more, something real. When you didn't break at rejection, it made people question whether they belonged. Because your presence reminded them of their membership fee, it made them ponder if it was worth it. You didn't just deny inclusion, you revealed its genuine cost and had everyone look at what they were after. 5. You were deliberately awake in a sleepwalking system. You never caused trouble. They weren't used to someone seeing through their lifetime fog. While others nodded, played the game, and kept quiet to maintain peace. You saw the foundation cracks and didn't hide them. Most people follow the script because it's easier. Keeps them fed, complimented, accepted. But you doubted everything. Not just the lies were noticed. You named. You didn't whisper hidden truths. You shouted it in rooms where everyone had consented to sleep. You were dangerous. You were awake, not loud or pushy. A system based on blind obedience makes someone with open eyes a threat. Your awareness unsettled them. Their routines were tested. It showed how much of their identity was built on obedience. That was too much for them. Instead of asking what you saw that they didn't, they sought to make you the villain. Your critics considered you stubborn and fierce. However, they wanted you small to stay numb. You avoided their docile diversions. You didn't seek their praise or crave their rewards. They feared you because you saw the system for what it is and couldn't be bribed, guilted, or gaslit into conformity. You broke the script and spoke your mind. In doing so, you reminded others of their sleepwalking lifestyles. You didn't just illuminate, your brightness shone. In a world wired to fear brightness, that presence will always make people squint. You shouldn't wake up. You saw despite being told not to. After that, you were uncontrolled. Not for power, but to stop being lied to. The kind of freedom this establishment fears most. 6th, clean energy was dangerous. Someone who wasn't playing the same nasty game as them confused them. There was no chaos, manipulation, or ego in your energy. Cleanness frightened them. They couldn't read you, bait you, or emotionally corner you. You weren't aiming to top others, gain power, or get cheap approval. You lived your truth, and that changed the air around you. Threatening, revealing. Their type operates in environments where everyone has something to hide. Currency, secrets, guilt leverages. Shaming is the leash. They use unstated rules and emotional blackmail to dominate others. There was nothing they could hold over you. You didn't falsely represent yourself. You felt secure without approbation. You wore no rippable mask. Your emotional openness rendered you resistant to their manipulations. Nothing was found for your viewpoint. No one is clean in their world, so that worried them. Each person manipulates another. You weren't motivated by fear, control, or insecurity. You weren't planning, just being. In toxic circumstances, that presence breaks the unwritten agreement. Everyone pretends. Everyone hides. And nobody tells the truth. You broke that contract unintentionally, so they turned against you. You showed them how much they were doing wrong to maintain their image, not because you did anything wrong. You became the only person in the room who couldn't be blackmailed, guilted, or compromised silently. That gave you power they couldn't match. You didn't abuse power. Whose energy couldn't be tainted or distorted broke it. That's why they panicked. Because moment someone shows they can live without manipulation, control, and hidden intentions, the whole organization collapses. That someone was you. Seventh, they sought predictability. You were divine chaos. They wanted scripts. They intended to isolate, classify, and manipulate your response to stay ahead. But you didn't act as expected. You followed real truth. You become divinely unpredictable. They expected someone to kowtow or explode. Only that language is understood. Resistance or submission. However, you brought something different. You didn't challenge their system. You overcame it. Not chess with them. You played a separate game, one without a rule book. They called it chaos, but alignment. Your actions didn't make sense to their control-driven minds. You accepted when they expected you to decline. When they believed you were hooked, you left. Forgave when they wished to fight. You burned something others would have died for. You didn't abandon ego or fear. Spirit guided you. Strategy and manipulation addicts don't understand spirit. Since you weren't winning in their reality, they couldn't predict your moves. You didn't value yourself by popularity or power. A higher flow couldn't be persuaded, seduced, or forecasted. That made you divine chaos, divine disturbance, not recklessness. Bridges weren't burned for spite. When they couldn't handle your reality, you let them fall. They called you unstable for not staying in the box. You weren't tameable, so they dubbed you difficult. They knew what it was deep inside. Freedom. Those who've never felt freedom fear it. You moved without asking, needing, or being understood. This sovereignty challenges everything control-based. You weren't wild. You were free. A world that confines souls will always view that energy as threatening. Eighth, you were unbought and unowned. Everything was tried. Flattery, guilt, phony opportunity, and misguided praise. Anything to get you playing. But you didn't. When offered prizes, you didn't jump. You didn't retreat when they withheld them. They recognized they had a problem then. You weren't seduced by recognition because your reluctance to be bought made you unpredictable, uncontrolled, and worst of all, incorruptible in a society where practically everyone has a price. You didn't seek status or phony alliances. You didn't sell yourself for approval or access. You spoke up for yourself, which made them uneasy because control only works on bargainers. You weren't negotiating. You accepted losing things others would kill for. Popularity, safety, comfort. You didn't want anything that required you to shrink, lie, or sell your spirit. You were dangerous because of that. Due of your transparency, they couldn't use leverage. You weren't owed their approval. Your loyalty wasn't sellable. It was sacrosanct. This puzzled folks who exclusively function in transactional situations. Your presence alone broke the unstated rule: play along or be punished. You didn't play. Therefore, they couldn't penalize you because you'd already given up on them. They wanted your story, gifts, and voice. You were planted in something they didn't give you, therefore they couldn't take it. You moved with the freedom that makes people mad after pursuing crumbs their whole life. You showed that you can be powerful and have a soul. You can decline and stand tall. That truth can triumph over comfort, not merely unbought. In a control-driven world, being untouchable was a problem. 9. You didn't give up to belong. They were scared about that. You entered rooms with your complete self, not simply what you thought would fit. You didn't cut your edges for others' comfort. You didn't control your intensity to appear kind. You showed your fire, oddities, and wounded. You boldly brought it all without shame. Most people have spent their lives modifying themselves to belong. Thus, fullness disturbed them. Your typical performance didn't flatter them. You didn't try to please. You didn't sugarcoat or dim your message. You were raw, integrated, and alive. Indeed, they couldn't handle it. Not because you were wrong, but because you reminded them of aspects of themselves they buried to fit in. You demonstrated the possibility of self-ownership. That upended their identity. They wanted you to feel insecure enough to request a table. You were the table. You were supposed to become safe, gentle, and silent. You were none of those. You didn't split to please. You didn't lie to impress. You became powerful because of that. People who don't relinquish themselves can't be puppets. Your presence made people uncomfortable because it reflected their compromises. Every bit of you they insulted or misunderstood was a sacrifice they made long ago. Seeing you whole pushed them to face what they lost to be accepted. They weren't insulted by your boldness. This was your freedom. Because moment someone realizes they can belong to themselves without permission, their lie becomes terrible. Their permission wasn't needed. That made you memorable. Some find it excruciating. Number 10. Cowards rethought their lives in your presence. You didn't attack to prove a point. You didn't wield your truth. You were genuine and unapologetic. It was enough. Enough to make pretense builders sweat. Because your presence was powerful without explanation. You entered rooms and made individuals feel what they'd avoided for years. Not what you said. This was your life. Real, not acting, not pretending. Realness unsettles individuals who have found comfort in lies. Being around you let them realize how much of their existence was borrowed. You didn't fix, shame, or push them to grow. Borrowed roles, beliefs, confidence. You didn't seek validation, revealing their work. You stood firm in your truth, showing them how often they lied. They were reminded of everything they fled. Each time they said yes when they meant no. They were silent at all times to maintain tranquility. You never judged them when they glanced in the mirror and didn't recognize themselves, but your freedom did. Because walking in alignment shows the cost of living out of alignment. Those still afraid find such discovery shocking. Thus, some distance themselves from you. Your presence was a mirror they weren't ready to look into, not because you were wrong. Your presence changed their choices, masks, and strength definitions. Instead of trying to be an example, you became one. That unnerved the cowards, because they realized your life wasn't louder than theirs. Simply honest. Honesty doesn't always shout. It's still, and in that calm, they see all they avoided. They never asked for your wake-up call, but couldn't ignore. Number 11. Without permission, you prospered. That was the crime. People pleading for approval, standing in line to be accepted were common among them. The system maintains order that way. Make everyone think they need a stamp to move, speak, shine, or lead. You didn't play that game. You pursued your mission without waiting. You didn't try out for life. You walked like you belonged. You pretended to be enough. People lost it because of that. No door knocking. Built your own. You didn't wait for recognition. You lived it loudly and unapologetic. Self-declared value threatens those who think others must crown them first. You ignored the gatekeepers and created your own path. That wasn't arrogance. It was clear. You didn't request power. You knew you had it. You revealed the illusion. Thus they loathed it. You proved waiting to be picked is dangerous. Not everyone lacks talent or vision. Waiting for permission that never came. You showed you didn't need permission to proceed. Your courage made their justifications look weak, which shook them. You succeeded without their approval, blueprint, or acclaim, so they could have done the same. But they didn't. They waited. Compromise occurred. They darkened. You skipped the cycle, so they weren't inspired. They saw a mirror. That mirror showed everything they could have been if fear hadn't limited them. Your defiance wasn't for fun. You knew you didn't need their approval to proceed. It made you dangerous. Because when one person bulldozes the gate, everyone questions why they're waiting. You failed because they allowed it. Because you stopped needing them, you thrived. That was the crime. Number 12. You never offered them a controllable you. They kept poking you to make you smaller, softer, and more manageable. Not because they despised you, but because they couldn't handle your nonconformity. To subdue you, they used guilt. Be humbler. They imposed expectations. You're excessive. It was all code for one thing. Make yourself manageable. You didn't. You refused to give them a filtered, diluted version of yourself to comfort them in their limits. You weren't rude. You existed. For those who only relate through power plays and performance, real is terrifying. Access to you was conditional on rain. You denied it. You didn't promise them what would happen. You refused to be stereotyped. Neither boxed nor bought. You remained wild. You became powerful that way. You were sovereign, not loud or belligerent. Your bounds were undisputed. Your energy wasn't exploitable. No one needed to like you to be grounded. You didn't lie to be accepted. You didn't dim your flame for their egos. You didn't shrink. You grew. Your expansion pushed at their inner limits, making them experience all they buried, the dreams they abandoned, the voices they suppressed, the truth they never dared say. You didn't simply arrive. Without speaking, you called them out. And they despised it. Because control only works when people fear rejection. But you weren't terrified. You selected yourself. Insecure people fear nothing more than someone who doesn't require their approval to be entire. You didn't play small for their script. You left their stage. When you did, the illusion collapsed. You never performed for them, so they couldn't control you. Number 13. Your power and wounds were obvious. They anticipated your suffering to disqualify you. They thought your scars would make you easier to dismiss. You wore them openly. You didn't lie to make people comfortable. You didn't act strong to fit their image. Your broken places breathed. You disproved the idea that vulnerability is weakness. Because they were used to individuals burying their wounds and not being brave, they didn't comprehend. They were used to suffering silently and not saying up. You didn't idealize life. You showed up before you were all healed. You speak your truth. That was revolutionary. In a world concerned with image and denial, you chose honesty. This made folks nervous. The issue wasn't your pain. You had power. The idea that you could carry both and still show up, speak truth, and radiate strength without covering your bruises shocked many. You survived what was meant to kill you. You survived and didn't try to forget it. Your healing wasn't silent. Your healing was obvious. That shook many to the core because they were still hiding their stories, trying to act unaffected by life, and hoping no one would see their fissures. You stood tall, scarred but strong, not ashamed, not silent, completely alive. Your existence prompted tough questions. What am I hiding? Let myself be seen? If strength is real, not fake. No one needed a lecture. Your life served as an example. Never being harmed wasn't your courage. Resisting concealment was it. You showed vulnerability isn't weakness. It's roaring, irresistible strength. That frightened those who define themselves by hiding. Number 14. They couldn't handle a nonconformist soul. They spent so much time adapting their masks to the crowd, pursuing acceptance like a hound chasing its tail. Their lives became an act, changing their story, ideas, and ideals to avoid controversy, keep safe, and be loved. You weren't playing that game. Being understood or accepted wasn't your addiction. Your authenticity was addictive. It was your compass that pointed in. You removed pretense daily. You didn't wear labels or impersonate others to suit a mold. Even when it made people uncomfortable or confused, you revealed your intricacies, paradoxes, and truths. You didn't want to blend in. It would evolve. To evolve, you must be honest, vulnerable, and refuse to stay in your old self. They assumed mimicking trends and ostensibly remaking themselves would keep up. Instead of changing leaves, you dug deeper and grew roots. Their revamps were costumes. Transformation was yours. They practiced lines for an unreal play. They lost because you wrote an unscripted real-time story. Not because you outsmarted or fought harder, but because you defied their survival cycle. You fluidized while they stiffened. Your movements were deliberate, whereas theirs stumbled. You lived honorably while they were visible. In a world that encourages conformity, your nonconformity was revolt. No matter how rapidly they tried to change looks, they could never catch up to a soul that evolves honestly and boldly. Not just surviving their game. You changed the rules by being yourself. Tactics, manipulation, and approbation don't give you power. It's based on your unchanging self. Instead of participating, you reverse their game by not playing. Your honesty wasn't a faint glow. The fire revealed every darkness they hid. You experienced reality while they chased delusions. You showed your face while they imitated masks. Their control crumbled when they had the guts to be entirely, fearlessly, unashamedly themselves. Your life proved that no institution, expectation, or fear can contain a truthful soul. Their biggest fear wasn't your achievement, strength, or voice. It was your insistence on authenticity. That refusal is your greatest win. Maintain your power. Keep growing without permission. Keep being the wild force that redefines authenticity. Ultimately, the only game worth playing is owning your truth. In that game, you win and become invincible. If this message touched you, share it. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and let me know which section spoke to you most. Your input matters. If you're following this path of truth, power, and purpose without apology, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. This isn't just material. A movement. You won't want to miss what's next. Maintain your authenticity and never fade.